Hey guys, it's Margaret here from Well Coach, and today I am bringing you another Real Talk video, this one around ways of working, with our focus being on what my experience has been like when retrospectives or team meetings lose their purpose and how we can bring them back on track as coaches and scrum masters. The main thing that I want you to remember is that when these meetings go astray, such as a retrospective, they aren't about reflection or learning. Sometimes they actually become a complaint session. Team members storm with blaming each other, or they just give status updates. So I actually want to dive into why that can happen and what we can do when it does happen and how we can steer it back with some grace and purpose. So let's get into it. Okay, so we've all been there before, right? We've all had that retro that suddenly isn't a retro anymore, or that team meeting that's not a team meeting anymore. We're going to specifically talk about retros today though, because I had a retro that went astray. So 1 minute, you'll be talking about the wins. And then the next minute, someone's venting about all the things that happened in the past 6 months, even though you've had lots of retrospectives between that. So that is why today's video is meetings that go astray, the hijacked retro. So what were my learnings with this? Well, it started out like any other retrospective for me. And this happened many years ago, before I became really a skilled facilitator, before I learnt and by that I mean before I learnt the art of facilitation. I was still fairly new on my Scrum Master journey, being a pure Scrum Master at that point, and I was lucky enough to have my mentor come along to a retrospective that I planned, and we were going off site. I'm sure a lot of teams do this, where sometimes the best conversations you can have are actually away from the office. They're off-site. And so that's what we did. We went off-site. And for a retrospective like that, I always wanted to try and keep it super simple. And so I had a big poster sheet that had the sailboat retro on it, because it kind of focused on everything, it covered everything, and that's what we used. And this is a team that I had been working with for some time. They were pretty mature, and I just want to mention that we retroed every 2 weeks. Like, we had retrospective every 2 weeks. We would always look at the good, the bad. We would talk about the lessons we'd learned. We would look at what was really going on. We would always be reviewing our social contracts and our definition of done, like all of those good things, those good team things. We would look at how we could improve as teams and how we build a really strong culture. So everything had been going really well. There was a lot of safety in there. Everybody got on so well. I never had a sense that anything was really bad, right? But when we happened upon this session, and whether it was because my mentor was there, I don't know, we were going around, we were doing our retrospective, and we got to one particular person and everything just kind of blew up. And at that point, as the facilitator, I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I had kind of just felt like I'd lost the room at that point, and to the point that my mentor had to step in and take over. So when I look back and I reflect about what actually happened and what went wrong, and this is something that can go wrong in lots of different meetings. This isn't the only meeting that I've ever been in where things have gone astray. I can absolutely assure you that. But when I stop and I think about the things that actually happened, I didn't have very clear boundaries. And as a team, we didn't have very clear boundaries. And what I didn't have then is I didn't have good structure in place with the team that if we ever had anything like that happen, that any one of us could yell a safety word like Elmo or Fijoa or whatever your team's safety word is. We had one for stand-ups when people started like waffling, we would say Nemo because they'd gone astray. But you know, when we never had boundaries, we didn't have really clear boundaries, and at that point there, because we were off site and we were in a pretty public area, I was very unprepared, and what it did is it kind of I went from being that really calm, composed Scrum Master, coach, facilitator into just reeling. Like I was my socks were blowing off, I guess. You know, I didn't know what had happened, where we had gone so wrong, and I started to really have a lot of self-doubt that I could do this job properly. So I guess the most important thing there is that this had nothing to do with me, and there was actually something else that had triggered these behaviors in that individual. So if we stop and we talk about, you know, what can go wrong in meetings in general, a lot of time as facilitators we can lose the room if there's no clear purpose or we don't have clear rules set up for that session. It's really important that you make sure as a facilitator that everybody is very clear around what they're going to get out of this meeting, and that is by introducing it at the start, or even in your invitation that you send out, that you've got in there. If you don't add your agenda in, be very clear about what the purpose of that meeting is and what the boundaries are going to be, because that helps people to understand how prepared they have to be. And it also helps set their emotional tone, right? If they're going to come into a room and they're going to be just frustrated and waving their arms in the air and I haven't read this document and I haven't watched this video, and there's this blame already, then you're never going to have a successful session at all. The other really important skill that as a facilitator we bring into sessions like this is that we need to be neutral. And if you're not neutral, if you can't stay with your facilitator hat on and the whole culture from learning to blaming, you can lose the room really quickly. And so, you know, some of the things that I've learned about why that happens is that so many emotions have just got built up. And, you know, if I reflect back on that retrospective that went astray that I kind of talked about at the start, for that individual, he had a really bad session with his manager. It had gone really wrong. He was super emotional. There'd been a couple of offhand comments from other people outside the team throughout the sprint, and we had built a safe enough space that when he vented and made it about the team rather than about his own situation. The other thing that you have to be really careful about in a meeting is, so it's really important that you have that, you know, check in with everybody's emotions. If you're going to be doing something like a retrospective, I know that most teams have a cadence, you know, every 2 to 3 weeks you do a retrospective, but sometimes it's a good idea just to check in with everybody to kind of see where their head's at. If somebody is having a particularly bad day, maybe you have to press pause and go, hey guys, we're just going to schedule this for another day. This person's just not having a great day today. We're not going to push it. You have to have really good safety in your team. If your people don't feel safe enough to be able to have those good conversations that they have to have, you're gonna lose the room as well, and the meeting will go astray because they'll keep it to themselves. They'll go and have those water cooler conversations. They'll talk to somebody else. What we also have to do though is make sure that we're not using the wrong forum for the wrong issue, because that can also lead to a lot of problems along the way. What would you do if something like this happens in a session? As a facilitator, one of the things that I have learned to do now, and the most important thing to remember, is that as Scrum Masters, facilitation is a skill set that we have to learn. It's not something that we just are born with when we enter this big wide world. It's a skill set that we have to learn. Facilitation is an art as well. It's not as simple as just scheduling a meeting and turning up and going, hey guys, we're going to talk about this, and then also taking part in all the conversation, the debate. You have to be the one that can settle the room. You have to be able to read the room. You have to be able to know when to pause and get everybody to pause and just say, hey guys, do you know what? This is really good conversation, or hang on guys, we're just going to press pause. This conversation is nothing to do with what our actual purpose is. Let's come back to what the purpose of this session is. What you've said is really valid, but I think we need to talk about that in another session. Take note of that. Don't disrespect what somebody's saying. Don't make them feel like an idiot or a fool, or don't make them feel like they're not worthy of what they just talked about. Make it really clear that you're not going to solve that problem right now, but that it's definitely something that needs to be discussed somewhere else. Make sure if it's in a retrospective that you are tailoring your retrospective for the problems that your team has now. And if you're really new in your Scrum Master journey, it is okay to use a simple retrospective until you are really getting the hang of it. Something that's super simple, like what helped, what hindered, what can we try, like using the sailboat. Whatever it is that you need to make sure that you're able to facilitate this and not lose it, you pick it. Don't feel like you have to go out there and facilitate a retrospective the way that a Scrum Master does who has been doing the job for over 3 years. It's a skill set, again, like I said, that we learn. If there are ever any huge issues that come up, and that can be in other team sessions, that can be in a stand-up, that could be in a retrospective, that could just be in a general team meeting, make sure that you put those on a parking lot. Like, take note of them, round out that conversation again, bring it back to what the purpose of the meeting is, but again, just say, let's park this and actually have a separate conversation about this. And the other thing to do is, if you need to, like if your session is 2 hours long, make sure that you break it up. Press pause and say, hey guys, let's just go and get a drink, or let's just get some fresh air, or whatever it is. Give everybody a few minutes to reset themselves, and then come back. Make sure that the energy is really high again when you come back in. So try and think about positive things or actionable things you can do. Don't ever leave it with the energy super flat, because you won't ever get to where you've got to get to. Okay, so just I guess, how do we wrap all this up, right? Because you've kind of my experience and what I went on. We've kind of talked about where things go wrong and how we can bring it back. But I guess the thing that I want to say is that as facilitators, sometimes the bravest things that we can actually do is hit pause. We don't always have to fix things in the room. We just need to hold the space. We need to protect the purpose of the session. That's really our goal. So I guess the most important thing to remember is that for us, it's clarity over chaos, always. So that rounds out this little real talk conversation. And I really hope you got something from it. If you've stayed to the end and you've found anything in here that can inspire you or give you some clarity, I hope that it helps. Thanks for sticking around. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. If there's something here that you think somebody else would benefit from, please share. And otherwise, I will catch you on the next Real Talk.